Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button, unless you're afraid of the dark truth hiding behind prison walls. Because after this story, you'll never look at a cell block the same way again. The screen fades to blue-grey tones. A storm rolls over the razor-wire skyline of Redfall Penitentiary, a supermax prison known to officers simply as the Pit. Tonight, everything feels tense. Even the air seems heavier. At 2:17 a.m., an emergency alarm shatters the silence. A correctional officer has gone missing. The last security camera footage shows him walking into Block E, a part of the prison no guard enters alone, the corridor controlled by two of the deadliest prison gangs in American history. The Black Hounds, infamous for their coded communication network, and the Serpent Union, known for their disciplined, military-style structure. Two groups that should have been enemies. But in recent months, intel suggested something more disturbing. There were whispers they were forming an alliance. When officers arrived at Block E, they expected a riot. Instead, they found the hallway empty, too empty. Even the inmates stayed silent, as if someone had warned them what was coming. The missing officer's flashlight was found lying on the floor, still on, still warm. But the officer himself, gone, without a sound. For Warden Alicia Monroe, this wasn't just a breach. It was a message. And it meant one thing: someone inside her prison had the power to make a man vanish. Monroe immediately called in veteran investigator Detective Samuel Riker, a former gang crime specialist known for exposing hidden alliances inside correctional systems. Riker stepped into Redfall with a cold stare and a notebook already half-filled with theories. Two gangs, one missing officer, he muttered. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. He began with interviews. Not with the loud troublemakers, but with the quiet ones. The watchers. The men who never spoke unless something was about to happen. The kind of inmates who'd rather take punishment than give information. The first inmate, a thin man with sharp eyes, only said one sentence. "You're not going to find him unless they want you to." The second inmate, trembling enough that his handcuffs rattled, whispered, "You're too late. Something big is coming." The third refused to speak at all. He simply turned his head toward the far end of Block E, toward a maintenance door that had been welded shut for years. A door that shouldn't have been important. But Riker's instincts told him otherwise. Down in the security room, he pulled the last 6 months of surveillance footage. He noticed something unsettling. Every time there was movement in Block E, the cameras closest to that maintenance door flickered for exactly 3 seconds. Not enough to raise suspicion, but enough to hide activity. Someone had hacked the cameras. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Riker zoomed in on the last frame before the officer disappeared. There, barely visible, was a shadow slipping behind the old metal door. He turned to the warden. "That door isn't welded shut anymore," Riker said. "Someone's been using it." Warden Monroe didn't argue. She ordered her emergency response team into Block E. Officers poured into the corridor, shields up, nerves sharp. But as they approached the maintenance door, something felt wrong. The door wasn't warm. It wasn't disturbed. It didn't look like it had been opened in years. But someone wanted it to look that way. Inside, the maintenance room was empty except for dust, rusted pipes, and old cleaning supplies. No signs of the officer. No signs of struggle. Nothing. Except a single item placed in the center of the room. A folded piece of paper. Riker picked it up carefully. The handwriting was rough, scratched in heavy strokes, like the writer was in a rush or angry. It read, "He was just the first." The room froze. This wasn't kidnapping. This wasn't retaliation. This was a declaration. Someone inside Redfall Penitentiary was planning something larger than a single officer disappearing. And if the message was real, the gangs weren't working separately anymore. They were working together. Riker requested another sweep of Block E. This time, he wanted dogs. The K9 unit moved quickly, their noses low, their handlers tense. The dogs stopped abruptly near cell E14, home to an inmate known only as Marlowe, a high-ranking member of the Serpent Union. Inside his cell, neatly arranged on the bed, were stacks of hand-drawn maps. Maps of the prison's underground maintenance tunnels. Tunnels most officers didn't even know existed. Tunnels that connected nearly every block in the facility. Tunnels that could move a man anywhere without detection. But the most chilling part wasn't the maps themselves, it was what was missing. In the center of the layout was a square labeled Sub-Level C storage. That room didn't appear on any official blueprint. Warden Monroe stared at the drawings, her face tightening. That room was sealed off 10 years ago, she said. We shut it down after flooding issues. Riker shook his head. Someone reopened it. If the missing officer had been taken underground, every minute that passed made the search harder. The inmates knew those tunnels better than any guard. And the gangs? They had been building alliances, trading favors, controlling movement, and communicating without speaking a word. Someone had unified them. But why? And where was the officer now? Riker ordered immediate access to the sub-level. Officers descended metal staircases into the cold, damp air below the prison. The walls were covered in mold, old electrical wiring dangling like vines. Their footsteps echoed in the dark as flashlights cut through thick dust. Halfway down the central corridor, a rookie officer froze. "Sir, there's something on the floor." Riker knelt beside it. A keycard. The missing officer's keycard. Its edges were cracked, and there was dried mud on the magnetic strip. The trail continued deeper until the team reached a massive steel door, unmarked, silent, and cold. The kind of door that didn't exist on paper. The kind of door only someone with real power would know about. Riker pushed his ear against it. Nothing. Then, a thud. A faint, echoing thud. Someone was inside. The officers readied themselves. Riker counted down from 3. The ram hit the door once, twice. On the third strike, the steel groaned open. Inside, the room was almost empty. Only a single chair sat in the center. And on it, not the officer, but something much worse. A notebook. Filled with names, dates, symbols used by both the Black Hounds and the Serpent Union. And on the last page, written in fresh ink, "Tomorrow night, blood will open the gates." Riker stared at the message, pulse hammering. This wasn't about one officer. This was the beginning of something far bigger, a coordinated attempt to break the deadliest gangs in prison history out of Redfall. And someone on the inside was helping them. But when Riker lifted the notebook, he noticed something else underneath it. A small, rectangular object. A recording device. He pressed play. A distorted voice whispered, "If you found this, you're already too late." And then the device went silent. Riker's face drained of color. Someone was watching them. Someone knew every move of the investigation. Someone was controlling the entire operation from the shadows. And as he looked around the empty sub-level room, he realized something terrifying. There were no cameras down here. No witnesses. No backup. Whoever planned this had just lured the investigators into a trap. And the door behind them slowly began to close. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind them, echoing through the sub-level tunnel like a cannon blast. For a split second, every officer in the cramped room froze. Their flashlights jittered across the walls as panic rippled up their spines. Detective Samuel Riker spun toward the door and rammed it with his shoulder. It didn't budge. Warden Monroe cursed under her breath. "It's locked from the outside. Someone's watching us." The sub-level was cold, damp, and suffocating. The air tasted like rust. The flashlight beams revealed something new. Thin wires along the ceiling, small enough to miss earlier, but unmistakably modern. Surveillance lines. Someone had installed a private camera system down here. "Everybody stay calm," Riker said, though his pulse was racing. There has to be another way out. These tunnels were designed as emergency routes before they were sealed. One of the officers pointed to a rusted ventilation shaft. "That might go somewhere." "Might," Riker said. "Or it might collapse." They had no time for safer options. He signaled 2 officers to lift him. He pried open the grate and crawled in. The metal groaned under his weight, dust choking the air. He slowly inched forward, praying the shaft wouldn't give way. After 20 feet of crawling, he reached a junction where the shaft split. One direction sloped upward. The other dipped deeper underground, into darker, untouched tunnels. He chose up. 2 minutes later, the grate above him cracked open into another corridor. He pulled himself through and unlocked a nearby maintenance hatch from the inside, freeing the team. But something was off. The corridor they stepped into wasn't empty. It was abandoned and vandalized. Spray painted onto the wall was a single symbol, a black hound curled into a serpent. The two gangs' emblems fused together. "They're not just working together," Monroe whispered. "They're branding themselves." Riker scanned the area. No sounds. No footsteps. Just stillness. Then he saw it, a set of footprints in the dust. Fresh. Leading toward the east tunnel. The missing officer might still be alive. The team followed the tracks, weapons ready, until they reached a junction where the floor sloped downward into darkness. Riker lifted his flashlight. "What is this place?" an officer murmured. The warden answered quietly, "These were cold storage chambers. Never used. Too deep underground." But someone had used them now. A faint noise drifted through the tunnel, a steady tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. A coded rhythm. Riker froze. That's communication. Morse. Someone signaling. He deciphered it quickly. Z. Oh. Z. They ran. The tunnels narrowed, twisting like a maze, the tapping growing louder. When they turned a corner, a metal door stood partially open. Riker kicked it fully open, bracing for an ambush. Inside was a small room lit only by a dying bulb. And in the corner, tied to a pipe, bruised but breathing, Officer Daniel Harlow. His uniform was ripped, his face swollen, but his eyes were sharp and terrified. "Don't stay here," he gasped. "They're coming back. They're coming right now." Riker crouched beside him. "Who took you? Who planned this?" But Harlow kept shaking his head, as if speaking would make things worse. "They're not just inmates," he whispered. "It's bigger. Higher. Someone outside. Someone funding all of it." The words hit like a bullet. "Outside." Monroe repeated. "Who outside?" Harlow hesitated, then forced out 2 words. "A supplier." Before Riker could question him again, heavy footsteps thundered through the tunnel behind them. Not one set. Multiple. The officers formed a tight defensive circle around Harlow. Riker killed the lights, signaling silence. The approaching footsteps slowed. The air thickened. Shadows moved at the tunnel's mouth. Then voices, low, calm, confident. "We know you found him," a man called. "Leave him. Walk away, and everyone gets to breathe a little longer." Another voice chimed in. "You're in our house now." Riker didn't answer. He flipped his flashlight on and shouted, "Move!" They bolted through the secondary tunnel, Harlow supported by 2 officers. Behind them, the gang members gave chase. Boots slammed into concrete. Their commands echoed, getting closer. A metal gate blocked the exit. "No keys," an officer yelled. Riker didn't hesitate. "Ram it." 3 officers charged. The gate bent but didn't break. The footsteps behind them quickened. "Hit it again." The second impact cracked the frame. A third blow snapped it free, and the team surged upward into another storage hall. Behind them, the gang voices grew louder. "They're trying to hurt us," Riker said. "They want us to take a specific path." He was right. The hall ended in a dead end, except for a grated elevator shaft. "That doesn't operate," Monroe said. "It's been shut down for years." But Riker pointed to fresh scrape marks along the floor. "It operates now." The grate was unlocked. They pulled the door open and squeezed inside. An old industrial lift hung on fraying cables. "Pray this thing holds," Riker muttered. The lift groaned as they pulled the manual lever. The cables vibrated violently, the platform shaking. Harlow clutched the rail, face pale. Below them, the gang members burst into the hall. "There!" one shouted. Gunshots rang out, improvised, illegal weapons someone had smuggled into the prison. Bullets ricocheted off the metal walls of the shaft. The lift shuddered but continued rising. Halfway up, one bullet struck the cable wheel. Sparks exploded. The lift jerked, screamed, stopped, then dropped 2 feet before catching again. Everyone went silent. The cables were fraying. "We're not going to make it," Monroe breathed. Riker scanned the shaft, looking for anything they could use. "There," he shouted. "Emergency walkway." A small maintenance ledge jutted out 10 feet away. Too far to jump safely. But the alternative was dying in a freefall. Riker grabbed the lift's outer guardrail, braced himself, and extended his arm toward the walkway. "Monroe, pass Harlow first. Move." One by one, the team leapt or were pulled to safety. When only Riker remained on the lift, a final bullet snapped the cable. The entire platform dropped like a stone. Metal screamed. Dust erupted up the shaft. But Riker had already launched himself toward the walkway, slamming into the metal grate and catching the railing by his fingertips. For a terrifying second, he dangled above the dark abyss. Then Monroe grabbed his wrist and hauled him up. Behind them, the tunnel filled with chaos, shouting voices, pounding footsteps, retreating echoes. The gang had lost them. For now. As they climbed into a higher service corridor, Harlow finally spoke again. "They're breaking out tomorrow night," he said. "But it's not just the gangs. There's a mastermind coordinating everything. Someone with money. Someone who wants these inmates free." Riker turned slowly. "Who?" Harlow swallowed hard. He called himself the broker. Monroe's face went pale. "The broker isn't real," she said quietly. "He's a rumor." Harlow closed his eyes. "No. He's real. And he's already inside this prison." The corridor fell silent. Riker's stomach dropped as he realized something horrifying. If the broker was in Redfall, it meant he had access to every guard, every tunnel, every system, and he was watching their investigation in real time. But before anyone could respond, a siren wailed through the upper levels. Not a warning. An announcement. Another officer had just disappeared. The sirens pulsed through the concrete like a heartbeat gone wild. Redfall Penitentiary, already a powder keg, erupted into chaos. Over the intercom, a trembling voice announced what no one thought possible. "Officer Reyes, missing. Last seen near the administrative wing." Warden Monroe's face hardened with disbelief. "They've moved outside the cell blocks," she whispered. "This is no longer a gang alliance, it's a full-blown infiltration." Detective Samuel Riker knew exactly what that meant. Whoever the broker was, he wasn't just orchestrating a prison escape. He was staging a takeover. The team moved fast through the dim service corridor, supporting the injured Officer Harlow. Every few steps, the lights flickered, evidence that someone was tampering with the power grid. When they reached the upper level, Riker noticed something chilling. Redfall felt abandoned. Not because people were gone, but because every officer they passed stared at them strangely. Silent. Too still. Too calm. Monroe leaned close. "Riker, something's wrong." He nodded subtly. Some guards looked scared. Others looked vacant. And a very few, didn't look surprised at all. As if they already knew what was coming. The broker had help inside. More than anyone realized. The team pushed toward the administrative wing. That's when Riker saw the first sign something catastrophic was underway. The security shutters, massive steel barriers meant only for extreme emergencies, were lowering across each hallway. One by one. Slamming shut like jaws. They were being cut off. "Move!" he shouted. They sprinted through the narrowing corridor and slid under the last shutter just before it sealed. Behind them, the entire lower block went dark. Ahead, an eerie blue glow illuminated the hallway, emergency backup lights. The corridor was quiet. Too quiet. Officer Reyes' radio buzzed faintly from under a nearby desk. Riker knelt, picking it up. The casing was cracked, as if ripped from someone's hand. Then he spotted something else. A smear of grey dust on the floor. The same dust from the underground tunnels. Whoever took Reyes had dragged him down, not out. Monroe clenched her fists. How did they get him all the way here? Riker stared at the floor. "There's only one answer," he said softly. "They were already up here." The broker had infiltrated the administrative wing hours, maybe days, before any crime occurred. Harlow, still weak, pointed toward the elevator bank. He uses the service lifts, he said. The ones key-coded for outside contractors. Monroe blinked. Those lifts aren't on the inmate grid. No gang member should even know they exist. Riker saw it now, the entire plan. The broker wasn't working from the inmates, he said. He was working over them. He used the gangs as a distraction. The chaos is just cover. Cover for what? Monroe whispered. A sharp metallic ping answered her. The elevator at the end of the hall opened. Inside stood a single figure. A man in a grey maintenance jumpsuit. Face calm. Eyes steady. No fear. No emotion. He stepped forward. And smiled. You must be Riker. Harlow gasped. That's him. That's the broker. Riker raised his weapon. Where are the officers? The broker clasped his hands behind his back, as if addressing a classroom. Safe, he said. For now. Monroe took a step forward, furious. You're going to answer. No, Warden, he interrupted. You are. He reached into his pocket and tossed a small device onto the floor. A portable screen lit up. It showed a live feed of Redfall's exterior gates. The guards. The checkpoints. The perimeter. Deactivated. Every last one. Riker stepped closer. You disabled the entire security system. No, the broker said. I replaced it. Behind him, the elevator doors slid shut. And the lights across Redfall dimmed, then shifted into emergency blue. A countdown timer flashed on the screen. 1 hour. Monroe's breath caught. What is that? A release schedule, the broker said calmly. In 1 hour, every electronically controlled door in this prison will open. Every gate. Every cell. Every exit. Riker's voice dropped. You're staging the biggest prison break in US history. The broker nodded once. And it will happen cleanly. Efficiently. Without chaos. That was the deal. Riker frowned. Deal with who? But the broker simply smiled. The people who want these men out. The people who benefit from their freedom more than their confinement. You wouldn't understand. Monroe stepped forward. You're insane. No, he replied softly. I'm necessary. He turned. If you want Reyes, follow the tunnels under administration. He's alive. Then he stepped back into the elevator, pressed a button, and disappeared into the descending darkness. For 3 agonizing seconds, no one spoke. Then Riker snapped back into motion. We have 1 hour. Let's move. They forced open the emergency hatch beside the elevator and descended into the lower sublevels. The tunnel beneath was colder than the others, and more modern. New wiring, new lighting, new construction. These tunnels weren't forgotten. They were built for this. Halfway down, the team heard muffled yelling. Riker sprinted ahead. They burst into a chamber filled with supply crates, and there, bound but alive, was Officer Reyes. He was shaking uncontrollably. They're not escaping, he stuttered. They're evacuating. Someone on the outside is picking them up. Armed trucks. Black vans. They're minutes away from the perimeter. Riker felt the world tilt. This wasn't a prison break. It was a transfer. A relocation of the deadliest men Redfall had ever held. Cut him loose, Riker ordered. We're stopping this now. But then, from deeper in the tunnel, came the low growl of engines turning over. Multiple engines. Reyes' face drained of color. They're already in position. Riker and Monroe exchanged a look. They ran. The tunnel opened into a massive underground freight bay, something no one in Redfall's administration even knew existed. And there they were. 3 armored vans. Dozens of masked men. Black hounds and Serpent Union leaders being loaded for transport. This wasn't chaos. This was a coordinated operation. A military extraction disguised as a gang riot. Riker stepped forward, weapon raised. Stop. It's over. Nobody leaves this building. Silence fell. Then a single masked figure stepped out of the shadows. Not an inmate. Not a gang member. A guard. One of their own. He removed his mask slowly, revealing a calm, cold expression. "You were never meant to make it this far," he said. "Turn around and walk away." Monroe stared at him in disbelief. You're with them." He didn't blink. "This place isn't what you think, Warden. These men have value. Someone is paying a lot to move them. You can't stop this." But Riker was already walking forward. "I'm going to try," he said. The guard raised his weapon. Then something unexpected happened. The engine of the lead van stalled. Smoke hissed from under the chassis. A gang lieutenant cursed. "Battery's dead. We can't move." Riker didn't hesitate. "Now," he shouted. The team opened fire on the tires, shattered the engines, and dropped every escape route the vans had. The conspirators panicked. The gang scattered. And then, above them, the master security shutter fell like a hammer, sealing the entire bay closed. The broker's calm voice echoed over the intercom. "Riker, impressive. Truly. But you only delayed the inevitable." The countdown on the wall clicked. 10 seconds. 9 seconds. 8 seconds. Riker turned to Monroe. "If those doors open." "I know." They braced themselves. And then, 1 second. The power snapped. The lights died. The countdown froze. The doors stayed shut. Every system locked itself closed instead of open. The broker had lost control. Someone else had overridden him. A female voice crackled over the speaker. "Detective Riker. Warden Monroe. This is Federal Counterterrorism Unit 4. Step away from the prisoners. Stand by for extraction." Riker exhaled in disbelief. Someone tipped them off. Monroe shook her head slowly. No, someone on the inside betrayed the broker. As Federal teams stormed the underground bay, the broker's voice returned one last time. Steady, unbroken, almost amused. "Riker, you win this round. But remember something." A long pause. Then, "Every prison has cracks. And I only need one." The line cut. Riker stared into the elevator shaft where the broker had vanished. He was gone. But his operation wasn't over. Not even close. The gangs were back in cells. The escape was stopped. But the mastermind behind the deadliest coordinated prison operation in modern history was still out there, planning his next move. And Redfall Penitentiary would never be the same. If you thought this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.